My name is Zoe Harper, and I can still picture the exact second I stopped feeling like someone's daughter. That was the day I realized they weren't even pretending anymore, not when it came to loving us equally. A year after we graduated college, I stood on the opposite side of the street and watched fire swallow the house I had rebuilt with my own hands. Flames climbed the walls like they were hungry for it. Chelsea, my twin, was on the curb crying hard, yelling about bad wiring and how none of this should have happened. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. All I did was murmur under my breath, "You should have left well enough alone." Have you ever been stabbed in the back by the very people you trusted to keep you safe? If you're watching this and that hits home, drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from. And if you've ever had to reclaim your power quietly without applause, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let me rewind and show you how all of this started. It began in our backyard, dressed up like a picture-perfect fantasy. White tents, flawless flowers straight out of Pinterest, the kind of setup that quietly says we've got it all together, even though everyone under that canopy was barely holding it together. The party was for our college graduation, Chelsea's and mine. We're fraternal twins and emotionally, we've never been on the same wavelength. She's always been the center of attention. I've always been the one making sure the lights stay on. That's just been our dynamic since day one. There was the clink of champagne flutes, the smell of overpriced catered food, and soft jazz floating over the polite laughter of relatives who barely knew each other. Everything felt normal, too normal, until my mom, Jocelyn, stepped up beside the outdoor fireplace and lifted her wine glass. Her smile had this exaggerated sparkle to it. "We're so proud of our girls," she said, squeezing Chelsea's shoulder just a little longer than necessary. "You both graduated with honors, and that's no small achievement. Your father and I wanted to mark the occasion with something special." I stood up straighter without realizing it. There was something different in her voice. This wasn't her usual empty praise, the kind she tossed around without meaning it. This sounded heavier, like something real was coming. Then I heard a box open. Not velvet soft jewelry, something solid. Metal clicked together. My dad, who always played the quiet role in their flashy marriage, pulled out a smooth white key fob attached to a rose gold keychain and held it up so everyone could see. "Chelsea," he said, "your downtown apartment is ready. 26th floor. Full skyline view. Fully furnished." The crowd reacted instantly. Gasps, applause, and Chelsea's perfectly timed shock. She squealed so loud I saw our elderly neighbor's poodle jerk awake mid-nap. "Oh my God, are you serious?" she yelled, rushing toward them. "The one by the river walk?" Mom smiled like she just handed out a crown. "Of course, sweetheart. You deserve something inspiring to start your future." Chelsea wrapped herself around them both while cameras flashed. Aunt Danielle already had her phone out, filming for social media. I stayed where I was, holding a plastic cup of lemonade that had gone warm in my hand. Slowly, people noticed I was still standing there. That's when my dad tossed something in my direction. It wasn't shiny. It wasn't new. A small ring of 3 rusted brass keys hit the ground near my shoes with a dull jingle. "Zoe," my mom said, avoiding my eyes, "there's a property on the east side. It needs some work. Think of it as a blank canvas." A blank canvas. The words didn't sound hopeful. They sounded like a threat. I bent down and picked up the keys. One still had a faded plastic tag hanging off it. 37C Oakley. Shed out back. Needs work. It looked like it had been written years ago. "Is this supposed to be funny?" I asked. "Chelsea gets a penthouse and I get a fire hazard?" Chelsea laughed nervously. "It's not that bad," she said, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Why do I always get less?" The question slipped out sharp and raw. I hadn't meant to cause a scene, but the sting behind my eyes made it obvious how much it hurt. No one answered. Not my mom. Not my dad. Not even Chelsea, who was already back on her phone, filming her apartment reveal for Instagram. "I asked you something," I said louder. The wind picked up, rustling napkins across the tables. Someone cleared their throat. Still nothing. No apology. No embarrassment. It was like I had faded out of the picture entirely. So I let the keys drop. They clattered against the stone patio and I turned away, past the guests, past the pastel balloon arch, past relatives sipping Chardonnay and pretending they hadn't just watched one daughter get humiliated. Behind me, Chelsea laughed again. But inside my chest, something shut down. It felt like a door I didn't even know was open slammed closed for good. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was exactly how they saw me. And that realization hurt worse than anything I could explain. That was the moment I decided I'd never ask them for a single thing again. Not help, not affection, not approval. They handed me a ruin. Fine. I'd turn it into something powerful. And one day they wouldn't be able to ignore it. That night, I curled up on the old twin bed I'd had since middle school. A crack in the ceiling, shaped vaguely like Texas, stared back at me like a bad joke. My diploma sat untouched on the desk, still sealed in its leather folder. I hadn't even opened it yet. The 3 rusted keys lay beside it, catching the weak light from the flickering overhead fixture. I didn't cry. I felt like I should have, but instead there was something worse, a hollow quiet, the kind that comes after anger burns itself out. I grabbed my phone, stared at it for a long moment, and finally texted the one person who always understood me. What did I do to deserve this? The typing bubbles popped up instantly. You existed too quietly, Marissa wrote. That's your crime. Want me to come over? I hesitated, then replied, yeah. Bring ice cream. And maybe a shovel so I can bury myself in the yard. She sent back a skull emoji and a flood of snack icons. 20 minutes later, she was climbing through my window like we were teenagers again. I didn't even wait for a knock. Your mom looked at me like I was dealing drugs, she said, dropping a bag of snacks on my bed. Do I look dangerous in bunny slippers? Marissa was barely 5 feet tall, with the attitude of a linebacker and a heart that always made room for my pain, even when I tried to hide it. She dug out mint chip ice cream and handed me a plastic spoon. I took it and started eating straight from the container. After a minute, she looked at me and said, so explain it again. Why does Chelsea get a penthouse and you get something that might give you tetanus? I don't know, I muttered, my mouth still numb from the cold. She's always been the favorite, I said quietly. The fun one. The one everyone thinks deserves things, I guess. Marissa rolled her eyes so hard I was pretty sure she saw a parallel universe. Nobody deserves a fully furnished skyline apartment just for successfully breathing their way through college. I shook my head. When I asked why, they wouldn't even look at me. Nothing. Like I wasn't worth an answer. Marissa snorted. Because if they actually acknowledged it, they'd have to admit what they're doing. And that would be uncomfortable. We sat there in silence for a moment. Then her eyes drifted down to the keys sitting on my desk. So, she said, where exactly is this horror movie location they dumped on you? I waved vaguely at the faded key tag. East Side. Oakley Avenue. She froze. Wait. Oakley? She blinked. Oakley as in the place Google Maps refuses to show street view? Yep. There was a pause. Then she stood up. We're going. Grab your hoodie and the keys. I brought gas and a sense of righteous anger. I laughed, actually laughed, for the first time all day. You're serious? Dead serious. I just bought mace and filled the tank. I feel invincible. We climbed into her beat-up Civic, the one with the glitter steering wheel and the faint smell of cinnamon gum permanently soaked into the seats. As she drove, the city shifted around us. Strip malls turned into empty sidewalks. Streetlights flickered in uneven patterns, like a warning we were choosing to ignore. The noise thinned out until the quiet felt wrong. Not peaceful, just abandoned. There, I said, pointing as we rolled past a crooked mailbox with 37C barely hanging on. Marissa slowed the car to a crawl. Girl, she said slowly, that's not a house. That's a dare from the universe. The place sat back from the road like it was ashamed of itself. Thick vines climbed the walls like fingers dragging downward. The porch sagged in the center, worn down like an old spine, and the front door looked like it had taken a beating years ago and never healed. No lights, Marissa murmured. No signs of life. I unlocked the gate, and it groaned loud enough to sound intentional. Come on, she whispered. Let's meet your charming new estate. My chest tightened as I stepped toward the house that was supposed to be my gift. Somewhere deep inside, I knew this was a turning point the moment everything shifted, whether I wanted it to or not. We stood still on the cracked walkway, the house looming over us like it had something to say, and none of it was kind. Okay, Marissa said, squinting up. That gutter is being held up by hope and one lonely nail. The yard had completely surrendered. Weeds ruled the ground, vines wrapped themselves around every beam like they had a plan. One window was boarded up. Another was just gone. The screen door hung off a single hinge, swaying gently in the breeze like a warning we were ignoring. I stepped forward anyway. The rusted key felt rough between my fingers. "Zoe," Marissa said carefully, "I'm just gonna say it. If this place showed up in a horror movie, I'd be yelling at the screen for the girl to turn around." "Same," I whispered. "But the girl never listens," she sighed. "So I'll be the best friend who follows her and survives." Sarcastically, I slid the key into the lock. It resisted for a second, then turned with a harsh metallic click. The door opened with a long creak that ran straight up my spine. The air inside was stale like a sealed attic, layered with something else, burnt, ruined. We stepped inside. My sneakers crunched over broken glass mixed with dirt and peeling paint. The hallway was narrow and dark, wallpaper curling off the walls like old parchment. Marissa fumbled for her phone and turned on the flashlight. "Oh my God," she breathed. "This place looks like it got divorced from the concept of safety." The front room was empty except for a collapsed bookshelf and a ceiling fan hanging low. Two of its blades snapped clean off. Stains ran down the walls from the ceiling like dried tears. Then I noticed the burn marks. One entire section of wall was blackened, charred, the plaster crumbling at the edges. The smell of soot hit harder the closer we got. Marissa stepped up carefully and tapped the wall with her knuckles. Ash floated down like dark snow. "This place was in a fire," she said softly. I didn't answer. I walked into what might have once been the dining room. The chandelier had melted into twisted copper. An empty window frame stood open, vines creeping through like they were trying to reclaim the space. My chest tightened. This wasn't needs elbow grease. This was abandoned, broken in ways no recent graduate could fix, especially not one with $148 in her bank account. All the fire I'd been running on, anger, pride, betrayal, collapsed. I sat down right there in the dust. Not dramatically, just tired. "They knew," I said quietly, staring at the floor. "They knew it was like this. They didn't give me a blank slate. They handed me garbage and called it character." Marissa crouched beside me and rested a hand on my knee. "Zoe." I shook my head. "I'm exhausted pretending it doesn't hurt. Pretending it's fine to always get the leftovers. The cheap seats. The rusted keys. What did I do wrong, Mar?" "You didn't do anything wrong," she said steadily. "You were just born second. It wasn't cruel. It was just honest. I worked just as hard," I said, my voice cracking. "Same GPA. I didn't screw around. I didn't flunk out. I didn't mess up. And this is what I get." Marissa didn't argue. She looked around, then, because she's her, flicked the nearest light switch. There was a spark, a pop, and the bulb sizzled before dying again. "Well," she said, brushing off her jeans, "on the bright side, we know the wiring's alive enough to kill us." I laughed through tears. It was absurd. The whole thing felt like a cosmic joke, and I was the punchline. Then Marissa turned back to me, her expression softer. "I know this looks like a grave," she said. "But maybe it's not. Maybe it's a blank canvas that just forgot it was supposed to be beautiful." I looked up at her. "You're serious?" She nodded. "Fire already tore through it. Nature's trying to reclaim it. Honestly, it can't get much worse." I lifted an eyebrow at her. "That's your pitch." She grinned. "You know I'm terrible at pep talks. But look around, Zoe. There's nowhere lower to fall. So maybe you rebuild, not because you owe them anything, but because this time it actually belongs to you." I took in the hollow shell of the house, its bones standing quietly like they were waiting. Maybe, just maybe, this could be the place where I unlearned every lie they drilled into me about who I was and what I deserved. 3 days after our late-night horror tour, I stood barefoot in the middle of the living room wearing rubber gloves, my hair shoved into a messy bun, and a dust mask strapped across my face. I looked like I'd wandered out of a low-budget apocalypse movie. Marissa showed up that morning carrying her sketchbook, a second-hand tape measure, and an amount of enthusiasm I didn't have, but desperately needed. "Step 1, she announced dramatically, unrolling a strip of craft paper across the filthy floor. "We clear the space and figure out what we're working with. Step 2, you promise not to cry when I show you what this place could become." I glanced at the ash-stained walls and the wires hanging like loose veins. And step 3. She smirked. We become legends. We started in the entryway. The coat closet didn't even have a door, just 2 busted hinges and a smell I chose not to question. We ripped up what was left of the carpet, which had rotted through in patches. Underneath it, to our surprise, were hardwood floors. Worn, splintered, faded, but real. Original, Marissa whispered like she'd uncovered buried treasure. We're keeping this. I don't care if we have to sand it by hand with a nail file. I didn't argue. I didn't have the energy to fight her optimism, and honestly I wasn't sure I wanted to. We worked for hours, pulling down warped curtains, scraping wallpaper that peeled off like old skin, sweeping debris into contractor bags with cheap brooms that kept snapping in half. By noon I was coated in dust. Sweat had dragged mascara down my face and my arms ached. But something unexpected was happening. My mind wasn't stuck replaying the betrayal. I wasn't picturing Chelsea sipping lattes on her rooftop terrace while I choked on plaster dust. I was present, moving forward even if it was only an inch at a time. Marissa knelt by the fireplace, sketching with quick, confident strokes. Navy, she muttered. A deep, moody navy in the kitchen. Pair it with warm reclaimed wood. People don't expect drama in a fixer-upper, but I live for it. You're color planning a house with no electricity, I said, dropping onto the floor beside her. That's how you manifest the glow-up, she replied, handing me the notebook. Her sketch was rough, but even in pencil lines and scribbles, I could see her vision. Floating shelves made from salvaged wood. Dark, bold walls. A kitchen island pieced together from flea market finds. Texture. Soft gold accents. Not shiny or new but earned. Alive. We took a break on the front porch, legs dangling, sipping lukewarm lemonade. I don't get why you care so much, I said finally. About this. About helping me. Marissa blinked at me. Because you're you, Zoe. And because if we can turn this death trap into something beautiful, maybe, just maybe, we prove you were never the problem. The silence that followed was heavy but gentle. I didn't know how to respond, so I just nodded. Later that afternoon we moved to the back bedroom, probably a child's room once, judging by the chipped pink paint. As I pulled a warped dresser drawer out of the closet, something slipped from behind it and rolled to my feet. It was a ceramic angel with one broken wing. Half its face had melted into a warped swirl of glaze, but the rest of it, its clasped hands, its tiny feet tucked into flowing ceramic folds, was intact. I picked it up carefully, brushing dust from the base. I knew this angel. It used to sit on my windowsill when I was a kid. My mom bought it at a church bazaar when I was 7. I remember because Chelsea had knocked it off during a tantrum once, and I glued it back together with clear nail polish and tears. How is this here? I whispered. Marissa knelt beside me. You think they just dumped everything here after the fire? I didn't answer. I was too busy turning the angel in my hands, trying to understand how a piece of my childhood had ended up buried in this place. Maybe this wasn't random, she said gently. Maybe this house chose you. I looked around at the scorched walls and broken fixtures. Nothing about it felt like a gift. But the angel, this half-melted little thing that had once mattered to me, felt like a message. Even in ruin, something survived. As the sun sank low, golden light filtered through the broken blinds. Marissa turned on the portable speaker she'd brought and blasted some indie anthem about building from the bones. We scrubbed walls until our hands were raw, laughter bouncing through the empty rooms like we belonged there. For the first time in days, I felt something other than anger. I felt like maybe, just maybe, I could make this place mine. Not for them. Not to prove anything. Just because I wanted to. There was nothing glamorous about waking up at 6 in the morning to open the bookstore cafe, then heading straight to a house that still smelled faintly of smoke and damp drywall. But routine became its own kind of comfort. Coffee shift, then scrubbing until my knuckles ached. Dinner was whatever fit in the microwave. Showers were lukewarm when the city water decided to cooperate. Still, I kept showing up. And so did Marissa. I had a dream about a navy wall, she announced one evening, bursting through the back door with 2 paint swatches in one hand and a bag of kettle chips in the other. A navy so bold people gasped. Like, did she really paint the entire kitchen wall that color? Yes, she did. I smiled, brushing plaster dust off my hoodie. You know we still don't have plumbing in the back bathroom, right? That's phase 3, she waved off. We're in phase 1.5. Distract from the chaos with bold visual choices. By then we had power in most of the house. The wiring was still questionable, but a local electrician agreed to fix it at cost after Marissa showed him our sketches and explained it was a self-funded rescue project. People started showing up to help, which honestly caught me off guard. Felt strange, almost suspicious at first. One afternoon, while I was hauling a stack of warped shelving toward the curb, a man from 2 houses down stopped and watched me for a moment. Earl. He wore oil-stained overalls, smelled faintly like an engine shop, and walked with a limp that made every step uneven on the cracked sidewalk. You the girl fixing up this wreck? He asked. That's me, I said, wiping sweat from my forehead. He nodded slowly and studied the house like it had personally wronged him. Used to belong to my cousin's ex-wife. Before the fire. I didn't know that, I said. Yeah. Place's got bones, though, he muttered. Shame to let him rot. You doing this alone? My best friend's helping, I said. She's inside committing color crimes. That got a chuckle out of him. You need cabinets, he said casually. I blinked. I'm sorry, what? Redid my kitchen last year. Old ones are sitting in my garage. Solid wood. Scuffed, sure, but better than whatever's left in there. I didn't even try to hide my shock. You just give them to us? Earl shrugged. Better than letting him grow mold. I'll bring him by tomorrow. I stood there staring at the spot he'd been standing for a full 5 minutes after he left. When I told Marissa, she let out a victory scream so loud it scared a squirrel out of the living room vent. I'm telling you, she said, grinning as she stirred a very questionable cup of instant ramen. This house has guardian angels. Or at least neighbors with time on their hands. The cabinets showed up the next morning. A few doors were missing, and one had a smell we dealt with using vinegar and a lot of hope, but they were solid oak. Real wood. Not the particle board junk we could never afford. Marissa sanded them down and painted them the same rich navy she dreamed up, then added gold pulls she scored at a flea market for under $10 total. Just like that, the kitchen wasn't just usable. It was beautiful. One night we sat on the kitchen floor with our backs against the freshly painted wall, sweat cooling on our necks, sipping flat root beer out of mugs because we still hadn't unpacked any glasses. I don't think they'd recognize this place if they walked in, I said. Marissa nodded. Good. Music drifted in from the other room. Some lo-fi beat that had become our renovation soundtrack. My arms ached. My shirt was permanently ruined. I had a blister on my thumb from gripping a paintbrush too tight. But beneath all that, there was something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. The house wasn't perfect. Not even close. But neither was I. And maybe that was the point. The day I officially moved in, it rained. Not the dramatic kind, just a soft, steady drizzle. Like the sky couldn't decide whether it wanted to cry. That felt fitting. The floors were finished. The walls were painted. The navy and gold cabinets gleamed. We'd swapped the front door for a salvaged one Marissa found at a salvage yard and painted it fire engine red. You need a little drama to announce a comeback, she'd said. There was no couch yet. No dining table. Just a mattress on the floor, my pothose plant by the window, and my old record player perched proudly on a milk crate. I played a dusty Fleetwood Mac record while unpacking thrifted plates and mismatched mugs from the cafe's clearance bin. None of it matched. None of it mattered. It was mine. Still, as rain tapped gently against the windows and warm light filled the space, a nervous flutter settled in my chest. Because that day, against my better judgment, I'd invited them, my parents, Chelsea, to see the house. Marissa had sighed when I told her. Are you sure? She asked. You don't owe them anything. Not after all of that. I know, I said. But I want them to see what I built. Why? I swallowed. Because some part of me still wants them to say it's enough. I hated that truth. But it was there. She didn't argue. Just gave me that look, half worried, half fiercely loyal, and said, then wear the jumpsuit. The one that makes you look like a wealthy, reclusive artist with generational trauma. At 3:15, tires crunched on the gravel driveway. Their SUV looked ridiculous parked in front of my modest little house. Chelsea stepped out first in heeled boots completely unsuited for cracked pavement, followed by my parents in matching windbreakers, like a parody of suburban unity. I opened the door before they could knock. Chelsea blinked. Wait, this is the same place. I nodded, trying not to fidget with my sleeves. Come in. They stepped inside cautiously, like they weren't sure they were in the right house. Their eyes moved slowly, from the wood floors to the refinished trim, to the navy cabinets catching the golden light from the back window. My mom broke the silence. Well, this looks very different. Dad whistled low. You did all this? All of it, I said. With Marissa. And some help from the neighbor. Chelsea wandered into the kitchen, running her fingers along the cabinet pulls. This is actually kind of amazing. She turned to me with an expression I hadn't seen in years. Not sarcasm. Not performance. Just genuine surprise, like she hadn't believed I could pull something like this off. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. I didn't think it was salvageable, she added. It looked like it got hit by a meteor. That might have been easier, I said, smiling thinly. Mom peeked into the half-finished bathroom. You've done a lot of work, she said. I couldn't tell if it was praise or caution. Right then, Marissa came in through the back door wearing paint-stained jeans and carrying a tray of lemonade in mismatched glasses. I brought offerings for the royal family, she announced cheerfully, handing Chelsea a glass before she could respond. We gathered around the butcher block island we'd mounted ourselves and sipped lemonade like it was champagne. The silence stretched thick and uncomfortable. I waited for praise, for acknowledgement, for we were wrong. It never came. But as they moved through the house, I saw it anyway. The truth written plainly on their faces. Chelsea wasn't pretending. She was impressed. My parents stood there like they didn't quite know where to put me anymore. I wasn't the quiet twin tucked into the background. Not now. Standing barefoot on those hardwood floors I'd sanded myself, watching them stare at what they once assumed I couldn't do, I finally understood something clearly. I didn't need their approval. I'd already built my own with my hands, my time, and my resolve. The first time Chelsea asked to use the house, it sounded harmless enough. It's just a few friends, she said casually, twirling her car keys around one finger. Nothing crazy. You don't even have to be there. I hesitated. You mean host something here? Just a small cocktail night, she added quickly. Your rooftop is honestly amazing now that it's stable again. And I've already told people how you redid the whole place. It'll make you look like a total visionary. She framed it like a favor. Like her party was somehow for my benefit. I wanted to say no. Every nerve in my body stiffened, warning me I was being nudged back into old patterns. But she was already moving on. Cool. I'll keep it classy. Promise. I should have stopped her right there. I didn't. When I got home the next morning after an early cafe shift, the smell hit me before anything else: wine, sweat, cheap perfume. Then I saw it. Lipstick-stained glasses overflowing in the sink. Pizza crusts hardened into the coffee table like fossils. Red wine, bright and unforgiving, soaked into the cream rug I just thrifted the week before. The sliding door to the rooftop was still wide open, letting in a breeze that carried someone else's cologne. I stepped outside. Beer bottles lined the railing. One had tipped over, dripping onto the floorboards. An empty salsa jar sat in one of my planters. My pot hose was snapped clean in half. I felt nauseous. My house, my sanctuary, my healing space trashed. And right in the middle of it all was Chelsea, stretched out in one of my salvaged patio chairs, still wearing last night's eyeliner, sipping iced coffee like she owned the place. She smiled when she saw me. Hey Zoe. Epic party, right? Are you serious? My voice cracked as anger rushed up fast. You said a few people, not a full-blown rave. She shrugged, completely unfazed. It wasn't that bad. Everyone loved the space. You should have seen how jealous they were when I told them I designed it with you. I stared at her. You told them you helped design this? I mean, I was here for the housewarming, she said lightly. That counts, doesn't it? No, Chelsea. It doesn't, I said. This is my home. You don't get to trash it and slap your name on it. She rolled her eyes as she stood. Relax. It's not like I broke anything important. I pointed toward the rug. That was vintage wool. You can't even replace that. She blinked, unimpressed. You care way too much about stuff. And you care way too little about other people's boundaries. The words cut out before I could soften them. She paused, then smirked. God. You get so dramatic when you think someone's stepping on your little empire. I didn't respond. I turned, walked back inside, and locked the door behind me. She knocked once lightly like it was a joke. I didn't open it. The next morning I called a locksmith. New locks. New codes. Because I was done letting people walk in and out of my life like they built walls I'd bled for. It had been a week since the party. 7 days of silence from Chelsea. 5 since I changed the locks and ignored her last text. Wow. Okay. Enjoy being the bitter twin. I thought maybe this was a shift. A quieter chapter. One where they left me alone and I kept building my life piece by piece, chipped nails and all. Then my mother showed up. No call. No warning. Just her silver SUV idling in my driveway while I pulled weeds from the cracked garden beds. She stepped out in her usual soft neutrals, lipstick perfectly matched to her cardigan, leather planner in hand like she was heading into a committee meeting. I stood slowly, dirt still under my nails. Zoe, she said with a smile I didn't trust. Can we talk? Every instinct screamed no. But I stepped aside and let her onto the porch. She didn't sit. She took everything in, the painted trim, the rosemary on the windowsill, the lemon scent from the candle Marissa had left burning. This is really quite lovely, she said softly. I wasn't sure it could be turned around, but you did it. Thanks, I replied stiff. Then her tone shifted. Softer. Controlled. We have a situation with Chelsea, she said, folding her hands. She's been having a difficult time. I stared at her. She had to sell the apartment. What? Financial issues. Credit cards. That sort of thing. I almost laughed. That's what happens when your wardrobe costs more than tuition. She didn't flinch. This isn't the time for sarcasm, Zoe. She needs help. She has nowhere else to go. Okay, I said slowly. And how is that my problem? That's when she smiled, the tight, pity-heavy smile that always meant I was about to lose something. She reached into her bag and pulled out a manila folder. Your father and I were reviewing paperwork, she said, setting it on the railing. And technically, the deed to this house is still in our name. I froze. What are you talking about? We never officially transferred ownership, she continued calmly. We let you use it, of course. But now Chelsea needs it. No, I said sharply. You gave this to me. Her head tilted. We gave you the keys. That's not the same thing. The roar in my ears was deafening. The porch felt unsteady beneath my feet. I rebuilt this place, I said. With my money. My time. My hands. I know, she said gently. And we appreciate that. But Chelsea needs stability. I stared at her. You're giving my house to her. She sighed like I was being unreasonable. Let's not make this ugly. You've done wonderful work here, but it's still ours. And Chelsea is family. We're not taking anything. We're just rearranging. I'm not furniture, I snapped. Her smile finally cracked. That's uncalled for. No, what was really out of line was handing me the burned-out shell of your forgotten fire hazard, and then yanking it away the moment she messed up again. My mom's eyes hardened. Lower your voice, she warned. The neighbors. Good. I shot back, my heart hammering. Let them hear. Maybe they should know exactly what kind of family I come from. We stood there in silence, the heavy kind that rattles around inside your chest and makes it hard to breathe. After a beat, she bent down and picked up the folder again, smoothing it like she was resetting herself. We'll give you a few weeks to pack up your things, she said, her tone snapping back to polite and measured. We're not monsters. And with that, she turned and walked off the porch like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just ripped something vital out of me and left it bleeding in the open. I didn't chase her. I couldn't. My body wouldn't cooperate. I just stood there, air trapped in my lungs, while the full weight of it crashed down on me. I had poured everything I had into that house, and somehow it had never belonged to me at all. That night the place felt different. Wrong. Every creak in the floorboards, every imperfect patch of paint I'd fixed by hand, suddenly felt distant, like I was already haunting it instead of living there. I left the porch light off. I didn't even lock the door. What was the point anymore? Marissa showed up without calling. She let herself in with the spare key I'd given her months earlier, carrying 2 bottles of cheap red wine and a bag of microwave popcorn. When she saw me curled up on the bare mattress, still wearing the same hoodie I'd had on all day, she didn't say a word. She just sat at the foot of the bed and handed me a glass. "Drink," she said simply. I took it, but I didn't sip. A Fleetwood Mac record spun quietly in the background, one of the few I hadn't packed yet. Landslide. Of course. I should have known, I muttered, staring at the wall. Marissa leaned back on her elbows. What happened? So I told her. About the visit. The folder. That tight, pity-filled smile. The way my mom had called me sweetheart, while calmly kicking me out of the only thing I'd ever truly built. By the time I finished, my voice sounded flat and empty, like I was reciting someone else's story instead of my own. Marissa didn't interrupt once. She just nodded and quietly topped off my glass. "So," she said eventually, "they're really giving it to Chelsea." "Yeah, and she's totally fine taking it." I let out a humorless laugh. "Of course she is. She probably already thinks it's hers. Hell, she probably thinks I borrowed it from her." Marissa looked around the room, her eyes tracing the navy cabinets, the shelves we'd built by hand, the art prints we'd taped up so carefully. Then she turned back to me with a calm smile that felt dangerous in the best way. "Okay," she said. "Then let them have it." I blinked. "What?" "You heard me," she said. "Let them have it." My chest tightened. "Marissa, I'm not just handing it over. Not like this. Not after everything." She sat up, legs crossed now, her whole energy shifting. "Exactly. Not like this. Not finished." I watched her closely, something inside me slowly stirring awake. "If they want the place that badly," she continued, "then maybe we give it back the same way they gave it to you." The room went still. And then I laughed once. Short. Sharp. It was ridiculous. It was petty. It was perfect. "You want to wreck it?" I asked carefully. "Not wreck," she corrected, eyes glinting. "Reset. We return it to its original condition. No stealing. No violence. Just subtraction." I stared at her as the wine finally warmed my chest. "They said it was always theirs." "Exactly," she said calmly. "So we're not taking anything that doesn't belong to us. We're just taking you out of it." Something strange settled over me then. The despair didn't disappear, but it loosened its grip. The shame dulled. In their place came something colder, sharper. "What about the wiring?" I asked. Marissa raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "I fixed most of it myself," I said. "Some outlets are still sketchy. I documented everything. I know what's solid and what isn't." She nodded. "So if someone overloaded the system, it'd be unfortunate," I finished. A slow smile spread across her face. I looked down at my hands, dry from cleaning, nicked from nails and splinters but steady. "This house wasn't safe when they handed it to me," I said quietly. "Why should it be safe when I hand it back?" Marissa clinked her glass against mine. "That's poetry." We sat there for a while, drinking in the soft orange glow of the record player. Outside, the wind rattled the broken fence. Inside, something new took root. Not grief. Not rage. Control. For the first time, I wasn't waiting to be seen. I was going to make sure they couldn't look away. The last days in the house passed quietly, almost reverently, like packing up a chapel before someone turned it into a casino. No music. No candles. Every move felt deliberate, surgical. Marissa and I worked in perfect sync, barely speaking. We wrapped glassware in old dish towels, folded thrift store blankets into boxes, and hauled everything to Carl's garage after dark. He didn't ask questions. Just unlocked the door and nodded. "The cabinets too?" he asked at one point. I hesitated. "Not the kitchen. I'm leaving the Navy." Carl smirked. "Good. That one says something." By the third trip, only the bones of the house remained. Walls I couldn't move. Floors I'd sanded myself. Fixtures we'd installed with pride, now hanging there without care. I'd packed the angel statue first. Marissa cradled it the whole drive. "This thing isn't getting ash on it again," she whispered like it was holy. The night before Chelsea moved in, we checked the wiring. I laid out my notes, every sketch, every label, every safe-ish and do not touch. Marissa stood on a ladder with a flashlight and loosened one kitchen outlet just enough. We don't break it, she said. We unsettle it. I nodded. Living room circuit trips if it's overloaded. Remember the blender and the space heater? Yep. Toasted the toaster. Exactly. That's the weak point. We weren't arsonists. We weren't setting traps. We were just stepping away and letting the house slide back into what it had always been, with the smallest nudge. Everything we'd added, light, warmth, life, was gone. What remained was exactly what they'd given me. On the morning I handed it over, I didn't say goodbye. I didn't touch the walls. I didn't breathe in one last memory. I just left. I took one last look at the empty spot where my record player used to sit, then pulled the door shut behind me. At exactly 4:17 p.m. Chelsea rolled up in a moving truck that was laughably oversized for whatever scraps of her life she still had. She hopped out wearing athleisure and wedge sneakers, phone already raised, filming herself before her feet even hit the pavement. "Say hi to my new place, besties," she chirped to her followers, spinning so the red front door filled the frame. I watched from the corner of the street, parked 2 houses down with the engine off. Marissa sat beside me, gnawing on the end of her straw like it was a cigar. "She's setting up the ring light," Marissa muttered, eyes locked on the front window. "Oh my God. That's outlet 1. I didn't say anything. I could feel it unfolding. We'd loosened wires, redistributed loads, reset the panel so the whole system was balanced on a knife's edge. One more plug. One more switch. One careless moment. The spark wasn't dramatic. Just a small one. Then a brief flash behind the living room curtains. Then smoke, thick black, rolling fast. The first scream came too late, after the fire had already crawled into the ceiling beams. When it did come, sharp and panicked and unmistakably Chelsea, it cut through the air like a siren. Marissa and I stayed silent in the car as neighbors poured out of their houses. Someone dialed 911. Someone else yelled Chelsea's name. She made it out. Of course she did. She stumbled onto the lawn in socked feet, mascara streaking down her face, clutching a tiny tote bag like it was oxygen. Then she turned around. The house was fully engulfed. Flames licked along the porch railing and burst from the rooftop vents. Windows cracked and popped as the heat forced its way out. I opened my car door and stepped onto the sidewalk. My parents arrived minutes later, screeching to a stop. My mother ran straight to Chelsea. My father just stood there, frozen, staring at the fire, until his eyes found mine. I didn't yell. I didn't move. I just met his gaze with something colder than anger. Truth. This is what you gave me, and this is what it gave you back. The fire department showed up too late to do anything but contain the wreckage. In less than an hour it was done. The structure folded inward, collapsing like a lie, finally giving up. Marissa stood beside me, arms crossed, as the last beam fell and sparks scattered into the dusk. "She did this," I said quietly, watching the neighbors whisper as the flames painted the sky orange. "She pushed too hard. And no one questioned it. Not the people who watched me scrub that porch week after week. Not the ones who saw Chelsea walk in filming herself like the place was already hers. The house was gone. But I wasn't. The next morning the air still smelled like smoke. It clung to my clothes, my car, the back of my throat, like something personal. I didn't sleep. Neither did Marissa. We ended up in Carl's driveway just before sunrise, sipping gas station coffee and watching cleanup crews haul charred wood and twisted metal out of what used to be my home. Or theirs. Or no one's. Across the street, Chelsea sat in my parents' SUV wrapped in a blanket, scrolling numbly on her phone. Her eyes were red, not from smoke but from fury. She looked up once and saw me. Neither of us looked away. She knew, but she couldn't prove a thing. When the firefighters finished their inspection, the captain didn't hesitate. "Faulty wiring," he said. "Overloaded sockets. Failed breakers. Textbook cause." And I had the documentation. The notes. The diagrams. The warnings I'd quietly given my mother. Warnings she'd brushed aside with gentle hand waves and polite smiles. They thought they could take what they didn't build. They just never stopped to ask whether it would hold without me. As the last of the roof caved in and the crew swept the sidewalk, I noticed the neighbors watching. Not with judgment but with something else. Understanding. Carl stood near his fence, arms crossed, giving a slow, knowing nod. He didn't say a word, but I could read it clearly. He knew exactly what they'd done to me, and what I'd done back. My parents approached once the embers finally died. My mother looked hollowed out, one hand pressed to her chest, the other still clutching her planner like there was a page in there that could undo this. This was our home, she whispered. No, I said softly. It never was. My father's eyes hardened. We gave you a chance and this is what you do? You gave me a wreck, I snapped. You handed me ash and told me to turn it into something beautiful. And when I did, you tried to take it back. You don't get to cry now. Chelsea stepped forward, arms wrapped tight around herself. You did this, she hissed. So did you, I said quietly. You just pushed too far. The silence that followed was heavy, stuffed with everything they'd never admitted. Every comparison, every favoritism, every why can't you be more like her. For once they had nothing to say. I walked away before they could find the words. I already had mine and I'd used them all. A week later I watched a man from Craigslist load my mid-century coffee table into the back of his pickup. He didn't ask why I was selling it. I didn't explain. It had been sitting in Carl's garage with the rest of what Marissa and I salvaged. The gold accent chairs, the forest green stools, a few vintage mirrors, even the half-melted angel statue I'd wrapped in fleece and tucked into a storage bin. Piece by piece I let it go. Carl stood nearby, arms folded. You sure you're okay with this? He asked, nodding toward what remained. I'm sure, I said, even though it stung a little. They're just things. He smiled faintly. You built all of it from nothing. Which means I can do it again, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. He nodded. You're tougher than you look, Zoe. I smiled back. Yeah, turns out I had to be. The insurance fallout was ugly but straightforward. Chelsea had plugged a ring light, a curling iron, 2 space heaters, and an electric wine chiller into one overloaded strip. The report spelled it out clearly. Negligence. That single word wiped out their insurance payout. No check. No rebuild. No miracle fix. I heard later that my parents had to refinance part of their own house just to cover the cleanup. I didn't ask for details. I didn't feel the urge to celebrate either. I simply stepped back because it wasn't mine to carry anymore. I picked up extra shifts at the cafe and slid back into my routines. Marissa, loyal as ever, helped me list and sell everything we'd stashed away. One piece at a time, I scraped together enough for a security deposit. The new place wasn't impressive, but it was mine. And in those weeks, I learned more than how to tile a bathroom or sand a floor flat. I learned how to stay standing when everything you built gets ripped away. More importantly, I learned not to ask permission for space I could claim myself. I didn't tell my parents where I moved. I didn't give Chelsea my number again. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty about it. I just felt free. A year later, my apartment smells like citrus cleaner and fresh paint. It's small, just a studio, with uneven floorboards and windows that rattle when the wind gets serious. Still, I love it like it's priceless. The walls are lined with framed sketches Marissa gave me. One of the red front door. One of the navy cabinets. Another of the broken angel, glued back together in soft pencil lines. Marissa sits across from me now at the tiny dining table, eating cold noodles straight from the takeout container and laughing at something on her phone. Listen to this, she says between bites. Someone commented, is it normal to cry while watching someone rip up linoleum? Apparently you're making people emotional with grout. I grin. We're artists of the broken. What started as a private journal turned into something bigger. A community built on second chances and sawdust. I write about rebuilding. Not just houses but lives. Choices. Boundaries. On Saturdays we host small workshops. Mostly women. Mostly tired. Mostly ready to take something back. I don't tell them my whole story right away. But eventually someone always asks about the fire. When they do, I just smile and say, sometimes the only way to rebuild is to burn down what never belonged to you. Then I sip my coffee, look around my mismatched, beautiful little home, and feel a kind of peace that doesn't come from having more. It comes from knowing exactly what I'll never accept again.